This episode is brought to you by Zeta Global. Do you know what it takes to transform marketing into a data-driven profit center? Are you able to align the C-suite around your AI vision and strategy? Zeta Global has the playbook to help you get started. Download Driving Growth in the AI Era today at zetacmo.ai/book. Again, that's zetacmo.ai/book.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm here today with Eric Franchi, and our guest is Kate O'Loughlin, who is the CEO of SuperAwesome. And that's actually the name of the company. We're not just calling it SuperAwesome. It's called SuperAwesome. She's a ad tech exec, and she's moved into the executive role at the company that focuses on youth marketing, to being able to advertise and promote to kids and teens in a clean, legal manner. Is this an area that you've spent much time, Eric?
I haven't, no. I've, kind of tracked SuperAwesome over the years, and it's been an interesting story, which Kate will get into. And it's fascinating because so much of what we talk about when we talk about marketing to kids is avoiding marketing to them, regulatory violations when you do market to them, and, keeping them safe from bad content and more. So hearing about like an actual business that's focused on building this category is something I'm excited about.
So Kate will be present and joining us at Marketecture Live. She doesn't have a speaking gig, but she'll be there. So make sure to say hi and tell her you loved her on the pod when it comes out on Friday. Marketecture Live is next Monday, and it is sold out. So please don't text me asking for tickets. I've gotten a lot of those. And you're going to hear from Eric and I on stage. Next week's pod will be our live interview of Brian O'Kelly. He has new products coming out he wants to talk about, which we're really excited about. And then, Eric, you're also on stage with Brett Wilson. Are you excited about that?
Yeah, I can't wait. There are going to be 6 cutting-edge AI startups. We're going to do a little showcase, and you'll see what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
And Brett is just awesome. So,
just note, it's a showcase, not a contest. We're not doing any startup contests. It's we're just gonna let them highlight what they do, and everyone will learn, and hopefully it'll be interesting. All right, with that, let's dive in with Kate. All right, Kate O'Loughlin, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You have the greatest company name in the world, I think. I'm a real connoisseur of brand names and, the weird things people do to come up with weird brand names. But your company name is SuperAwesome.
Yes. It's good to project awesomeness, kind of gets you out of bed every day. But I know you're into company name etymology at the moment. So I will tell you that it came from the combination of a company called Box of Awesome. Okay. Which was like a sampler, remember like Birchbox? It's kind of Birchbox for kids. Yeah. And then Box of Awesome merged with a company called Swap It. And then the lore is something Vegas, and out comes SuperAwesome.
All right.
I like it.
When you're at like cocktail parties and you explain what you do for a living, do people think you're joking about the company name?
Yes. And actually, after I left Tapad and was on the first kind of Christmas party circuit, people asked if it was a cry for help. And I assured them that building something for a quarter of the world's population that none of the rest of AdTech and MarTech attend to is a good idea.
The awesome part of the population. So SuperAwesome has had an awesome story. It's been around the block. I actually, researching this pod, I found some errors on Wikipedia that I personally updated. So I've improved your social clout. But tell the rest of us, what's the story on SuperAwesome?
Yes. So SuperAwesome is all about enabling the youth digital ecosystem. And our big, hairy goal is to build a safer internet for the next generation. And we want to do that by making kids and teens seen, heard, understood, and included because when those things happen and they're valued and they're included, then they're not going to be pushed into the deeper, darker parts of the internet, and they will be valued for the consumers that they are today and that they will be in the future. And well, how do we get them to be more included? Well, if you're a maker of a thing, so a casual game or a game that you're building on Roblox or content that you're making on YouTube or a streaming channel, if you're a maker of those things, you need tools to be compliant and to attend to safety and the things that you have to do a bit differently for youth audiences. And you need money. You need to be adherent to the stick that is regulation, but you also need the carrot to fuel making good choices and doing the extra work. Well, where does the money come from? It comes from advertisers. And so we work really hard with the brands to help them engage with youth because they know that they're ones that drive sales today and tomorrow. So they'll bring more money into the digital ecosystem so that ultimately people make things more inclusively for kids and teens, and then they're safer.
Yeah, it's challenging monetizing that kind of inventory, both for the legal reasons, but also the lack of data and stuff like that. We'll talk about that in 1 second. I just want to kind of talk about you for a second, which is how did you become the CEO? Because you have a background in ad tech for the most part, and most people who listen to this pod have backgrounds in ad tech and want to be CEOs one day and probably never will be. So tell them how you made the jump.
Yeah, so I came to SuperAwesome after a decade in ad tech myself, between being very early at MediaMath, started there in 2008, and then TapAd right when we were inventing cross-screen identity all the way back in 2011. And I saw how all the sausage was being made, frankly. And I was part of, really understanding consumers down to the identity level. So when I had the opportunity, post-acquisition by TapAd to try something new, I came to SuperAwesome to, serve some penance maybe and undo some of that and, take my understanding of programmatic into an audience that nobody else was paying attention to. And so I started to help the co-founders, Dylan and Lee, expand into the US. So I was first general manager of the US, then became global COO. And then when Dylan, the co-founding CEO, lots of years at the business, founders got a found, and we'd already been acquired by Epic, went to go do new things. He had done a lot to support me to be ready to take over as CEO. So especially coming off of International Women's Day this weekend and talking about how important sponsors are, especially for women in the industry, Dylan was a great sponsor for me and getting me ready to take the role.
And then you spun it out. So it was acquired by Epic, which I guess owner of Fortnite, among other things. And then what happened? How did it spin out?
Yeah. So the reason that Epic acquired us in 2020 was to help make the metaverse inclusive for all players. And so we came in, especially we had a product that was a non-media product that helped with the hard problem of getting parents' consent when kids need to reveal something private about them to play the game, right? Like kids' voices and video and their precise location, that's all protected data. You have to have a verified parent say yes to kids sharing that. So we had this really great product, a graph, kind of like TapAd graph of consented parents that made it much easier to get parents and kids through that pipeline. And so we integrated that into the Fortnite and Epic ecosystem, as well as provided it free to the many other game developers. And that really helped to jump Epic up to being, where they wanted to be for metaverse players. And, I won't take all the credit, maybe a little bit of now Lego and Disney each, putting in a couple $1 billion of investment into Epic. They wouldn't have done that had that platform been not ready for kids.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the media, the advertising business wasn't core to Epic's business model. So as we got to, 3 years in and earnouts and, change in Dylan going and me stepping into leadership, we had a conversation with Epic about them being an investor instead of an owner to let us go do the things that we thought were priority for kids media. And that's how we came up with this arrangement. So Epic is our minority owner and investor. The company is owned by the management team and the employees, and we're off rocking to the races a year and into independence.
That's so cool. And did you keep the tools that Epic had originally bought? Are they part of the new SuperAwesome, or are they still part of Epic, the age verification stuff?
The parent verification stuff we left behind with Epic. Wasn't making any money anyway, so that's okay. It's a free product. And we brought out all of the media-related products.
Okay, so let's step back. And you mentioned the carrot and stick earlier, but can you just give us a sense about what is the current state of, I guess, kids and youth media in the digital world?
So I'm going to come at it maybe from two different perspectives. So what's going on from a policy and reg perspective, the the stick, and then we'll talk about the carrot.
Yep.
So the stick remains with lots of momentum. Just last week, one of the only bipartisan topics that exist these days, Ed Markey and Bill Cassidy reintroduced COPPA 2.0 at the federal level, which would extend the long existing data privacy laws for kids up to people who are 16.
It's currently 13, right? In the US.
Currently 13, going to 16, and then it adds a bunch of data minimization type stuff. Who knows if that thing is going to be passed as it exists today, but it really does speak to the momentum for more people to be protected, not less, and that age going up to 16 and in many jurisdictions 18 is really here. Here in New York State, we have bills that protect kids up to 18 from an appropriate perspective and from a data perspective. California and Europe, up to 18 with the age appropriate design code. In the UK, that is all coming with a lot of momentum. And you see that coming from policy wonks and parents too. Like they need help asking for tech and platforms to help them with.
I think everyone knows what COPPA is, but separately, there's a lot of conversations around like not allowing kids on social media until they're 16. How do those two things interact?
So I think they do get convoluted. So data privacy is what kind of is all about what kind of information can you collect and use about kids. But then there's safety, right? Which is what is someone seeing and feeling and hearing and experiencing and the content that they're in. And so obviously collecting more data to put kids into deeper, unhelpful and unhealthy loops, that is a thing that connects them together, but they really are quite different topics. And so sometimes that gets mucked up a lot in the legislation or when people talk about it, but really it is two different things.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I interrupted your flow. You were talking about the stick. Are we done with the stick or is there more stick?
Yeah, it's done with the stick. And now carrot, right? There's so much going on with the importance of this audience. I mean, talk about Lego. I don't know if you're both Lego fans or they were when you were kids, but their business today is really thriving, of course, on the core products. But, if you see like the Botanicals line and like the $300 sets that are flying off the shelves with kid adults, those sales don't happen had they not had the legacy of those people being fans of Lego when they were kids themselves. And so really, I think the continued understanding and education of how important audiences are for sales today and connecting them with who they'll be as lifetime fans tomorrow is improving.
Did you say kid adults?
Yeah, kid adults.
Is that a thing? Am I a kid adult?
Yeah, if you've been to...
Definitely are.
I think you are. I definitely think
Do kid adults wear athleisure around the house? Is that like, are we just going to combine words whenever we feel like it?
Yes, I think so.
There's actually an interesting little subtopic, which is how much is the marketing to kids in anticipation of building brands for when they're adults?
Hard to put a number on it because I think that's some of the problem is that how much money goes into consumer versus shopper. It's hard to measure and to get right. It's like you have to first get the kid or teen to really want the thing or love the IP, and then you need to get mom to buy. And so the money that gets spent kind of across the two gets conflated sometimes.
Sure. And is the market for advertising and marketing significantly different on like kids versus teens? Are those different like budgets, different types of activities?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it all needs to come back to doing a better job of really understanding the audience and understanding that it's a graduated thing and try to separate out their interests. And that's one of the things that's I'm excited about next for this space is getting beyond like all things pink equal girl and all things blue equal boy and all 6-year-olds act like 12-year-olds. That's just not true. The type of audience-based buying that we're used to in general marketing just hasn't existed for kids and teens. And I think that's often a relic of TV and people kind of not really understanding what you can do with data and understanding the audiences. And that's a real thing that's, I think, an improvement coming and that we're investing in.
The most remarkable difference between generations is their media consumption.
Absolutely.
Kids today might play with Legos the same way I do as an adult, but they definitely do not watch the same shows. And I noticed on like the SuperAwesome website, there's a lot of talk about the creator economy. So
Yes.
like maybe it would help our audience if you put yourself in the head of one of your buyers, like your brand manager or marketing manager for one of these brands that skews young, maybe toys or maybe just a youth brand. What are you thinking in terms of media mix and execution?
It is definitely led by creator and creator content because that's where kids are spending their time today, and it's who they want to be and what they're engaging in. And creator economy, I think a lot of people in media buyers kind of feel more confident when it comes to YouTube and YouTube influencers, but really now many of the gaming platforms are all about creator economy. Like if you think about Roblox, it is the new YouTube, and it's actually the new social media. There's 40 million games now on Roblox. Anybody can make a game on Roblox. It's only going to get easier with AI and no code and sort of the tools that are available. And so it's all about understanding how kids kind of and teens cross that line of being entertained, using creator type content and gaming type content to connect with their friends, and then them being involved in the process. So it's super important.
Yeah, Roblox. People underestimate Roblox. My tween daughter, when she was younger, she used Roblox so much we had to replace a couple of keys on her keyboard. She just like wore them out, the L and the K key, from running around the Roblox universe.
It's remarkable to see, the entrepreneurship that happens on that platform. We just did some research that it's now getting to be that kids' digital side hustles and creating and selling UGC is making them as much money as they've made historically in mowing lawns and babysitting. It's a wildly entrepreneurial generation.
Got to mow the virtual lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
So like how do you do that? So let's say someone comes to you and says they want to be in Roblox. I assume this is part of your business. How do you actually execute that?
A bunch of different ways. Sometimes it makes sense to help a brand build their own experience. Most of the time that doesn't make sense. If you remember when everybody wanted to have their own app in the App Store in 2011, and we were like, Clorox, you do not need your own app. In the main, that's how the Roblox economy is today. It works better to integrate your brand into existing gameplay, do it authentically. So you might do a brand integration, or you might even do video ads or billboards that Roblox has, increasingly investing there for their over 13 audience. But that can't be done in isolation, and you get more bang for your buck if you connect that back into the paid media that you're running out on casual gaming, like your Subway Surfers type of stuff, and connected TV, in YouTube, and then with influencer content, creator content in those platforms too, because kids are so fragmented. They're using their screens at the same time, doing different things. I'm not sure if you see that in your own households, but like my kid, he's on the couch, he's playing his Switch, he's got the tablet going with YouTube, and then on the TV behind him, he's got, Captain Underpants running on Netflix. Like it's all a fluid experience, and you have to, even more so than adults.
Yeah, that's a bit much. You brought up a question I have about casual games and about age verification, which I guess is not in the notes, so it's sort of a little unfair question to ask you. But recently, I guess Mark Zuckerberg was in Congress, and he said he was all for age verification. He just thought the App Store should do it. And that seems to be falling on deaf ears. Any thoughts on that? It's a hot potato.
Yeah, it's a hot potato. It's a hot potato because who wants to be the ultimate arbiter of sensitive data like that? And then if you get it wrong, hold the consequences. So I think it would be great if the App Store, who already has the ages of who's downloading and logging in, would share that. But I'm not optimistic that they will take that up and do that.
It
themselves.
seems like a straightforward solution. I don't understand the resistance. The incentives for makers of apps to identify their users as audiences, like one of the fundamental things that still needs to be fixed, right? Like if you're a mobile publisher and put up the COPPA flag like you should in the OpenRTB spec to send your inventory upstream, Trade Desk will drop it immediately. Yeah. Doesn't know bidding. AppLovin just stopped supporting COPPA inventory. And so now if you're a game developer, you're going to make money to keep your business going. You have no incentive to be honest about who your audience actually is. And that's a fundamental thing that needs to change. Yeah, we did that at Beeswax. We saw the COPPA flag, we just dropped it. So is there any programmatic advertising, legal programmatic advertising to COPPA consumers, I guess you would say?
There is, but it's on the publisher, like I said, to identify their content. And then it's everybody up the chain's responsibility to respect the flag. And that's, like SuperAwesome Tech, we help that in the flow, not just on should you buy the inventory on the bid decision, but also when you send the ad back out, making sure that the ad itself isn't stuffed with trackers and pixels that are then going to leak consumer data too. And that's not in the OpenRTB spec. It's something that you have to think about and do yourself as a brand or all of the buy-side tools you've got.
Does SuperAwesome have a bidder?
We do, but we, want to work with the whole ecosystem so that everybody along the chain is protected, not just us.
Yeah, sure. That'd be ideal, but sometimes you have to do it yourself. So before the show, you sent some interesting thoughts by email about AI and the effect here on youth. What are you kind of thinking in terms of how AI affects the media market and how it relates to youth?
Gen Alpha is the AI native, right? We talk about digital natives and millennials and Gen Z, but Gen Alpha, they are the AI natives. A quarter of kids 13 to 18 use ChatGPT every day or at least every week, as compared to, 30 to 40-year-olds who only 12% of people report that they use it that frequently. And so when you think about that generation being creators and making content or even working in our companies, they are going to be fast to help us, and expect to have the tools available to them that are AI fueled.
Yeah, it's like generational. For people my age, there was this whole controversy about using Wikipedia, and there was the whole generation was taught that Wikipedia was inaccurate and terrible, and then like a couple years later, it became the default because the people who grew up with it were fine with it. And I think there's something similar here, where probably a lot of people in their 20s and 30s and millennials think of AI as sort of this backup, this sort of like dirty secret, this trick for getting their jobs done, and the next generation is going to use it natively.
Absolutely. There's so much I think that's going to transition in our companies with Gen Alphas being our employees. I mentioned to you that, by the time media analysts are coming up in 2030 and 2035, I doubt that any of the analysis will be done in Excel, as an example, because Google gave Chromebooks to 60% of American kids, since the teens. And so they all know how to use Sheets, and they all, they don't know how to use Excel. And so Excel is going to die with generation, perhaps, that's the sort of stuff you have to invest in the new generation to use. I'm
going to not agree with that one. When someone moves from Google Sheet and they use Excel the first time, it's like if somebody's been having like instant coffee their whole life, and then you give them an espresso. Like Excel will blow their eyes will dilate, and they'll just change their lives the first time they use Excel.
I don't know. I mean, or they just have an agent do it all for them, and we won't be talking about spreadsheet processing at all.
Yeah, I would like a sentient Excel.
Yeah. This has been fascinating. Anecdotally, I've heard that kids Gen Alpha, they have poor spelling, versus even just Gen Z and then previous generations, and it kind of doesn't matter, right? Because in this world that we're talking about, there's so many AI tools that so much of what previous generations needed to be adept to, it's just not going to be a skill set that's necessary. Do you have a view on kind of theories like that, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. Their handwriting is terrible too, but their typing skills are amazing, and that's because of how much time they're spending at school and at play, online. And I think that like the values are the things that, go into especially creation and creativity are going to be coming from, come with different values as the generations change.
It's always hard to underestimate the amount that things change with generations. I spoke in an NYU class yesterday, and mostly, early 20s, late teens. And we asked them things like, do you use Photoshop? And most of them, no, they're using Canva instead. And you have these transitions that go on where everything changes.
Yeah, and almost to kind of take another step further and make this relevant to this audience that listens to the pod, what do you think about the future of like what we consider the open web? Just like publishers, media companies. When we think about this generation that values creators, that are spending so much more of their time on games, do you think there's a generational shift that will affect the lifeblood of ad tech as we think about it?
One of the interesting things is like the concentration of content on like a smaller set of topics is really going to change with this generation. So what I mean by that is, it used to be that if you were a kid, the content that you were exposed to was Disney Channel, Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon. And so you went to school and you talked to your friends about what you saw on those three channels. Or if you were a teenager, you're talking about what you heard in Top 40 radio and, what was featured on MTV. And so what you were exposed to was quite limited. And therefore fandoms and like things that people were really into were quite concentrated. But now that dissipation of fandoms has really started to explode. And that's connected to the amount of content that's available and the fragmentation of content. And so when I think about like publishers of the future and trying to find and like catch those trends and have people come loyally to your thing because they're really into it, that variety is going to be really, really explosive and really that much harder to break through on. I mean, like just the point of 40 million games on Roblox. Like, how do you break through as a maker to get enough people to follow your thing? That's a big change. Is like how you'll invest in content and how you develop IP and how you build a company around a small set of things.
Last question, a quick one. What happens to TikTok?
Well, I think it was Sunday or so that there were 4 companies in the mix, and it was up to him to decide. I don't think that means that any of us can predict what's going to happen. But, the variety of parties that are rumored to be in the mix is so fascinating. You've got everybody from Mr. Beast to, the Dodgers guy who is much more of like we want to, decentralize social media and social identity to then.
Isn't the founder of Reddit Alex or I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
He's in with the Dodgers guy on Project Liberty, and then you've got Perplexity AI, which I don't know very well. They're said to be in the mix, but it could even just be that if Trump's saying that the U.S. should get a 50% stake in whoever buys it, who is going to be the steward of that? I don't know. There's somebody who's familiar with running tech companies close to running that 50%. Maybe we will see something there.
That's not the best.
yeah. But like, I think that TikTok's not afraid to play chicken. And from what I've read, they're not even really engaged in the sale. Like, they don't have a banker. There's no like set on valuation. They're not like gearing up for a sale themselves. And so would they just turn the whole thing off rather than selling it if Trump doesn't kind of push it back? I think that's a possibility.
Fascinating. Okay, let's call it there. We will be back in a minute for the refresh and the news of the week.
Uh-oh, the last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the refresh. So this week we have the DOJ coming back and opining on the future of Chrome. Bad vibes at TTD customers that talk to Adweek. A bunch of back and forth on creative companies, LG and Alfonso update, and a bunch more. Okay, let's get through as much as possible here. So number one, the DOJ still wants to have Google spin out Chrome, but it will allow for AI investments. This is something we mentioned last week. So basically, they're no longer calling for the mandatory divestiture of Google's AI investments, which I think is an important thing, and it will instead be satisfied with prior notification for future investments. So basically, the government wants to make sure that, they're aware of investments that Google makes on AI. The Chrome thing is kind of interesting, I think. So a browser, at least today, is super important. And Eric Seufert, who we talk about very frequently on this pod, he had a post this week that, I can't get out of my head personally. Basically, he says, okay, there's a forced divestiture of Chrome. Meta or Amazon, to your point, Ari, they buy it and basically they print money for as long as browsers are relevant. I think that's a very interesting idea. Who knows if actually something like that would let pass, but they have, completely sort of closed the loop in that scenario. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, browsers are a linchpin of power on digital, and Google has used that power fairly benevolently. Like there hasn't been that much that has benefited Google from Chrome, except for generally keeping other people from controlling it. I think it's very unlikely that it would be spun out in such a way that a different tech giant would grab it. It does beg the question about why Amazon doesn't have its own browser already, being able to log in and effectively having a built-in version of Honey where it can get deals from anyone and offer a competitive deal. Seems like kind of a really, I don't want to say no-brainer, but it's a pretty powerful idea. And the other aspect of this, which I think I wrote about in a newsletter a couple of months ago, was that Chrome as a standalone is not a very good business. It doesn't have a lot of revenue streams. It has Chromebooks, which is a pretty small revenue stream. It will not be allowed to have default Google in the search bar. It'll have to auction that off in some way that's much less beneficial. And I think doing some of the aggressive advertising things like selling data or showing ads would have a lot of risk to the consumer experience. So overall, it's kind of a bit of a puzzle what happens to Chrome. I would advocate maybe it turns into a joint venture nonprofit like Bell Labs, and it builds Chromium, and then people can build their versions of Chrome on top of that maybe. But would Google be prohibited from having a browser, or would they just be forced to spin out Chrome? These are all kind of interesting questions that will be worked out.
You know, what's funny is up until recently, I think people would have like totally poo-pooed the idea of Amazon releasing a browser. But just with all of the AI capabilities, and I think people generally kind of being interested in testing new things, I think it's actually, it's a small chance, but there's a chance that a browser from Amazon with some very cool capabilities could actually get some traction.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of missed opportunities in the browser world because of its ownership. There's all these conflicts of interest that Google has that wouldn't exist if, let's say, Chrome was a giant private company and could do anything it want. One way it could go is it could do what Brave is doing and just aggressively block ads and make the internet faster. Another thing it could do would be to have a commerce play, like we mentioned earlier, have Honey built in. A third thing it could do, which it hasn't done, is really syndicate its single sign-on capability and payments so that you can have the dream of not having cookie banners on every site and not having to log in on every site and just seamlessly surfing any website and maybe making payments from a single wallet. All these things that Chrome does not do currently, but could in the right circumstances.
I just think that it's interesting that they didn't take Android off the table. So that will be another wrinkle here is where my Android falls, a device and a gateway to. So adds to the intrigue for sure.
It definitely feels like DOJ under Trump is not taking its foot off the gas at all. And there was that report from Bloomberg about 8-9 days ago that they were lobbying. And I take that report as being a sign that they weren't getting anywhere in the court. You lobby the president so that you can avoid what the attorney general wants to do. And I think that is pretty indicative that things are not going Google's way in D.C.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. Gail Slater, the new antitrust appointee under DOJ, she's happily supported bipartisanly, and she's doesn't seem to want to take her any pressure off. And same thing with the new head of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson. He has also, said some things about his skepticism of the power of big tech. So I don't think that's going to be a reversal really in approach to antitrust under this administration.
Great. Let's move on. So this isn't news. This is an article that came out, but I think it was very worthwhile for us to chat about a little bit. So in Adweek this week, Trishla Aswal and Paul Hebert, sorry, Paul, if I butchered that one up, they talked to a bunch of TTD customers. And to use your summary, Ari, the vibe is off. So this was a really interesting piece. They, basically talked about how all of the upgrades, quote unquote, to Kokai are, being blamed for a lot of the issues that customers have with the platform. I'll pull a couple of quotes here. We could talk about it. So customers described an update that greatly reduced the use and function of the Trade Desk's buying platform. The Trade Desk is a buying platform. Another quote, the new interface, which is modeled after the periodic table of elements, is not intuitive and forces media buyers to learn an entirely new workflow that feels disconnected from industry norms. Now, I think this is interesting because TTD they're renowned for a lot of things positively, but one of which is the interface, the ease of use, the intuitive nature, and people seem to be, customers seem to be locked in because it's such an easy to use DSP. And it seems like the changes have reversed that. What do you think?
Yeah. Some background here. So I think Kokai is the new UI, which is based on the periodic table. The old one is called Solimar. They have fantastic naming over there. And the feeling is that the company wants people to move to Kokai, and Kokai feels as though it's more PMax-like, where it's sort of set it and forget it, and customers don't really love that. I also, as a product manager, I will say that if your UI is based on a metaphor, you've already lost. In B2B, it's fine. Maybe in B2C that works, but UX is like all about standardization. People want to know that the settings tab is where the settings tab always was, and the reporting tabs where the reporting tab always was. They don't want to look for, nickel iodine and try to figure out what that means. So I thought this reporting was great. I had spoken to the reporter last week about this story, and she told me that every customer she talked to was complaining. It wasn't bad apples. It was overwhelming negative feeling among customers, which is, scary if you're the trade desk coming off a pretty bad earnings report.
It's interesting. From a B2B perspective, that's really challenging. B2C, oftentimes, I remember when Zuckerberg used to announce a change in Facebook back in the day, and like the news feed and this feature, that feature, people would go crazy. And then the next day, you would never hear about it because they adapted to the new behavior. This is a different circumstance with B2B.
Yeah, I think the vibe, like I said, moved from this being a stock problem to being a real problem. Because who knows why they missed their quarter? Sure, and it wasn't even that big a miss. But if there's something fundamentally wrong with the product and the customers, that's a really big concern for anyone who holds that stock or works there, et cetera. And I'd love to hear from some of them. They've been pretty quiet.
Yeah, I mean, you could always dial it back, right? You can just reverse course and give the people what they want. That's always an option.
Yeah, I don't know the details. It sounds easy, but you never know with products. Who knows what's in the secret sauce there.
This is true. Kate, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to throw stones. I was the first product manager on Terminal 1 at MediaMath, and it was hard to get the get the flow right. So, I have a lot of empathy for the PMs at TTD right now.
Absolutely.
How old is Kokai? Did it come out in early 24?
I think that's right.
Right. I'm not a user, so it's hard for me to speculate. I've never logged into it.
Shout out to the PMs. Okay, let's move on. This is a fun one. All right, so Marketecture has a newsletter. You all should subscribe. It's awesome. Ari goes deep on a topic every single week. And this topic, or this week rather, the topic was creative. And you challenged the category as saying, well, pure play creative tech has yet to build a large business that is a pure play. And you made good points about how it's usually becomes a large business when it's connected to media. And, I think you made some great points there. Plenty of chatter on the internet about it. Yesterday, so there's this company called Icon we talked about a few weeks ago, mind you, that is backed by Founders Fund and, is just a pure play creative tech using Gen AI. The CEO made a post, and we'll link to it in the newsletter, yesterday. So it sounds like, number one, Founders Fund doubled down in the business and put more money in. They didn't specify how much. And then some of the stuff that he was talking was wild. I'll pull some of the quotes from his post on X. We've gone from 0 to 5 million in ARR in 30 days, are extremely profitable, and will beat every company ever on the 1 million to 100 million ARR record, which is less than 12 months. And after this, ultimately, we will be a $10 trillion company, which is doable with inflation.
He also said, we only hire the 0.1% best engineers and we make them work 7 days a week. 6 days is not enough. So this sounds like a great
Do you have
CEO.
feelings? Do you have feelings about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this company has found a very valuable niche. If you look at their website, it's all vertical video. We all know it's kind of hard to create vertical video ads, and people aren't used to doing it. So he found an underappreciated sector, and I think it's probably a great product if you want to advertise on TikTok or Reels and don't know how. That is not a $10 trillion company. He also talks a lot about media optimization, which I assume he doesn't really know very much about. But it is instructive, and I wrote this in my newsletter, that the only real company in creative that has got scale is Smartly. And Smartly is very deeply in media optimization. They do not just do creatives. They started as a kind of Facebook creative creator. But if you go to their website, you'll see they're emphasizing optimization and outcomes almost as much as creative. So good luck to Icon. I didn't love the post, but if the CEO wants to come on this pod and defend himself, he is welcome.
That would be fun. Let's make that happen. I agree with you. We've invested in some creative companies, and the one or two that have broken out do more than just ad creation, right? They're like building more infrastructure for the entire workflow. And then, as I mentioned, like if you put creative connected to media and you build some sort of network-like offering, you can build a good business. Like that's what we did at Undertone. Cargo has taken this like to a much greater scale. It's a fantastic business. So I think there's a difference between, not thinking creative is valuable as a standalone pure play versus how you make it work with a business.
Yeah. And if he gets the 100 million in ARR in a year, like he says, he'll also break the record of being the largest creative tech company maybe in history. Yeah, for sure.
I would just like to hear from him how he's going to involve like influencers who are used to making vertical video and really compelling stuff, and how that is included in the creative process, because massively important too. And I'll harp on it, youth audience in the upcoming generation.
Yeah, and for TikTok, it's a really good point, right? Because if this is pure, Gen AI based creative production, it runs contrary to creators, right? Who, by default are building it themselves because they're the object.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting. You go to his website on Icon, and he has this competitive chart, and his competitors in his chart are OpenAI and Claude, and those are not his competitors at all. Right. No one is using OpenAI to create creatives at scale. Like his real competitors, who I hope he knows about, are Smartly, Celtra, and a bunch of other companies who do exactly what he does, but just didn't get the AI in the press release note yet. Right. So it's possible that they don't really know what they're doing, or it's also possible that they're just extremely good at playing the PR game.
Yeah, I would imagine this is, strong marketing. If they are at 5 million ARR, they're in market, they're talking to all types of customers, and they're surely kind of understanding the competitive landscape because, they're asking people to switch.
Yeah.
Super interesting. All right. LG Ads, Alfonso update. What we got, Ari?
All right. So we haven't talked about this one in like 6 months or so. Let's do a quick recap. There was a company called Alfonso. It was a competitor with Samba TV. They do ACR and figure out what's on your TV. They got acquired by LG Ads like 2 years ago. Nice exit. But the exit had complicated governance where they were keeping a board of directors, and the investors from Alfonso got certain seats. And there was this whole plan that maybe LG Ads at some point would go public. And depending on who you believe, the story is that the LG corporate kicked the board members out from the independent investors in Alfonso and basically took control over LG Ads, and the Alfonso shareholders were left in the cold. Fast forward to the Delaware Chancery Court, and the Alfonso investors sued and won, and now just got affirmed by the Delaware Supreme Court. So the Alfonso investors are back in charge of LG Ads, and they have the right and are pursuing it to do an IPO. So unless there's some sort of settlement, LG Ads will be dragged kicking and screaming onto the public markets sometime later this year. And it is a messy situation over there.
It's a big business. It's probably north of $1 billion at this point.
I'd love to read the S1. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, especially the S1 of something that's this contentious. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure LG corporate back in Seoul or wherever it's based must be really unhappy with this whole situation, with their fast growing, highly profitable group in turmoil and some outside agitator investors asking for their piece of flesh. Yeah, fun in the corporate boardroom is all I can say.
Hey, on the M&A front, it has been a quieter week relative to a couple of weeks. We had like 2 or 3 deals hit, but there was one acquisition we should give a shout out to. So Chartbeat acquired Fattail. Are you familiar with Fattail?
Yeah, so Fattail is like a mini operative. I know they wouldn't want to hear that. They're like operation workflow for publishers. They help the order flow come in from the Salesforce and the forecasting and then the execution. They're built on top of an ad server. They're not an ad server. They've been around forever, 15 years plus.
Yeah.
And it was reported they had 45 employees. I think the thing that all this M&A has in common is the amount of years that the companies have been in business. You know, between Lotame and Fattail, those are generational companies being handed down to the children. You know, hey kids, this ad tech platform, you're going to run it one day,
and that day has come.
I think my son would never talk to me again if I handed him over this podcast.
2025 is the year of generational shifts. Also think it's interesting that it's Chartbeat. You know, Chartbeat is technology analytics for media companies, publishers. They've, I think, made a couple of acquisitions along the way, and this is another acquisition.
Yeah, they picked up Tubular Labs, recently, right. which was an interesting one.
Yeah, what's Tubular Labs?
That was more on creator analytics and measuring like brand dimensions in influencer content and charting sentiment and stuff, which is hard to do at scale and pretty interesting that they picked that one up.
Chartbeat was actually Beeswax's first office. They gave us a free conference room in exchange for being able to pick our brains about advertising whenever they had an advertising related question. So we have some photos of it. It was above the Strand in New York, for those of you who know the city.
Super cool. Shout out to Chartbeat, building a next generation publisher centric company. Hey, let's talk about one more thing before we call it a day. So, connecting a couple dots, there was a good piece last week in the Wall Street Journal about AI buying platforms like Advantage Plus, PMax, et al. I'll pull a quote out, which I thought was kind of wild. AI buying agents are going to be directing upwards of 80% of digital media buys by 2030, said Ben Hovness, chief media officer at ad buying firm OMD, part of ad giant Omnicom. That sounds like, I mean, outlandish, right? 80% of ad buying. But then if you think about Google, Meta, Amazon, right? The percentage they are of the digital ad market, and then their very explicit push to make as much of this automated stuff part of the ad business as possible, you can probably like bottoms up the math here. But 80% of the ad market is gigantic.
I'll tease out two questions here. The first question is there a role for custom algorithms, custom attribution in this world? Because we know from our friends at Chalice, but also just the history of a lot of these platforms, that sophisticated customers and their agencies really have their own point of view about what ROAS is and how to calculate it. And there's no way they accept the black box when they want to have that control. And so that's the first challenge is, can you have an AI plus control over your outcome measurement and your outcome capabilities? And then the second related question is, can these AI platforms work in a transparent environment? Because currently the leading platforms are all tied to walled gardens and lack of transparency. You don't know what margin you're taking at PMax, et cetera. Can, like the Trade Desk's Kokai, crack the nut and give you a fully automated capability that also has a fair, transparent margin? And to date, that has not been proven.
Yeah, those are two good questions. So, I mean, for me, number one, I absolutely believe that there's, going to be a real future and a real role for the automated, custom algo companies. We're an investor in a couple of them. And I think there's total opportunity there. And then, yeah, the transparency thing runs counter to what these platforms are, right? In terms of pricing, in terms of publishers, in terms of understanding analytics. So there's a real tension point there. And again, maybe it's TTD, or maybe it's a different company that just blows this category wide open and brings the best of both together.
Maybe it's whoever buys the Chrome browser.
Maybe. You pointed out that there was a related point here. So Google relents and gave PMax buyers not transparency, but 10,000 negative keyword capabilities.
I know, this is pretty exciting. Go tell your loved ones. Scream it from the rooftops. We have 10,000 negative keywords now. Previously, it was only 100. And what this means is that if you're using PMax, you can really stamp out a lot of things you don't want, whereas previously it was pretty limited. I think more the story here is that Google might actually be listening to its customers a little bit. That might be a change. Something in the free cafeteria that put a little extra caffeine in things. Or I'm not sure what's going on, but I think it's good news for PMax buyers that they're getting a little more control.
Agreed. And we should call it there. Hey, it's 5 days out from Architecture Live. I can't wait to see both of you in person.
Yeah, I know. And I, to the 47 people who've asked me for tickets after we sold out, get on your assistants, put it in your calendar. Got to buy tickets a little bit earlier. That's all I can tell you.
There was an early bird discount. There was an early bird. Someone said to me, I won't say who. I'm not going to name and shame Sam Cox for texting me this, but he texted me. Hey man, when was this conference announced? I forgot about it. And I was like, dude, we announced it at Thanksgiving. It was Thanksgiving. Amazing. All right. Well, I can't wait for next week. In the meantime, Kate, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks. Can't wait to toast you with some green beer.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture Podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.